Hi, everyone. I'm Jake Strawn. I'd like to welcome you to my podcast, The AuthorsCast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Rebekah Dodson, who is quite the prolific author and yet has another one on her way. I hope you enjoy today's episode, and without any further ado, let's get started.
Hey, Rebecca, thanks so much for joining me today on my new podcast that I'm starting, The Authors Cast. How are you?
Doing pretty good.
Good, good. So we had a couple communications through, Facebook and Messenger and such. You're a professor as well as an author.
Yep. So I'm an English professor and a humanities mythology professor. I currently have 50 books published under Rebekah Dodson, and then I have a few more under a few different pen names as well. And then I'm also the owner of Thorned Heart Press, which is a publishing company that does romance and erotica. And then we just, as of December 25th, are launching our subsidiary, Thorned Dagger Press, which is publishing fantasy and science fiction.
Wow. So you got quite the resume, quite more of a, you know, resume than I have as a first time author. But hey, thanks so much for, being here and sharing some of your insights. So I'm assuming you've been writing for a pretty long time. Yeah,
About 10 years.
10 years. Okay. Well, was there anything specific that said like, hey, I want to just start writing or, you know,
So I've always been writing. When I was a kid, I used to write fan fiction of like Civil War stories. And so I also
okay.
write Star Wars fan fiction and Xena the Warrior Princess fan fiction. So that's kind of how I
Oh,
started when I was in about sixth and seventh grade. And I got some poetry published in high school with the National Poetry Foundation. And then I didn't even start thinking about writing a novel until I was actually 30 years old and I had finished graduate school. So
okay.
I got my graduate degree in English and creative writing through Southern New Hampshire University. And I started writing and playing in the genre of steampunk. And I wrote a steampunk novel that ended up being my master's thesis. And so through that whole journey, I connected with editors and book doctors and a whole bunch of people in the field that were like, it is so easy to publish. I ended up publishing my first book, Postcards in Paris, in 2014. A friend from graduate school and I started a publishing company. It didn't last very
Oh,
long.
that's
Turns
so
out it
cool.
was a little harder than we thought it would
Oh
be.
no. No. Well,
So I've been
oh,
self-published since 2016.
okay. All right. So you went the traditional route for the first 2 years of your writing career, and then you went the self-publishing route. What did you what's been your experience with both? So I'm assuming you probably like the self-publishing route a little bit better if that's what you stuck with for the latter half.
I actually still have some of my books up with a traditional publisher, internationally in Australia and in England. And so
Okay.
one of the things I loved working with a publisher is it was way low stress. I didn't have to do anything
Yeah.
except for just like edit my book based on their editor's feedback. And then they did the
Hmm.
cover design, they did all the marketing. It was really great to just send them a manuscript and do nothing.
Mm.
But um, unless you get that big five publishing deal and go with a small publishing press, you still have to market yourself. So that's really
Yeah.
hard because with a publisher, you don't have access to like making new materials or new promotional materials, new marketing materials.
Uh-huh.
So if your marketing stuff isn't working or it's not capturing the essence of your book, you can't really create that. The publisher has to do it. And you're stuck on their timeline, and they have several things going on. So one of the things when I started my publishing company was I give my authors full access to everything. They get their manuscript, their cover, their EPUB, their Mobi, their
Mm.
PDF. They get all the teasers. And then after their contract is ended with me, they still retain rights to all of that information.
That's really
So
nice.
they can take that into another publisher to self-publishing land to wherever they want to go with all that material we've created for them. So we're not just a publishing company trying to sell books, but we're trying to help authors create a brand. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I really liked about a publisher is it taught me the importance of branding. With self-publishing, I have so much more freedom to kind of develop a marketing plan and do whatever I want to get my book out there, to make sure I've got a cover release, a pre-order up in 3 months before it releases. A lot of things that I do a lot differently than a traditional publisher would.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you make such a good point about branding yourself. I mean, I went the self-publishing route, right? And it's very difficult to, network yourself. And it's honestly, I tell a lot of people, and I'm sure you probably agree with this, owning, your own book is like you're a small business owner. Essentially, you got to market your product, find your target audience, and, even when you find them, it's a very small, minute percentage that are actually want to purchase and read, your product. So, wow. Yeah.
One of my greatest promotion tools is actually using Story Origin because you can put
Okay.
your book into different book bundles and you can do newsletter swaps and everything is all in one website. And that I have done almost as a professor, I'm really busy. And so Story Origin is
Oh, I
my
bet.
number one marketing tool. And so even if I just spend an hour on there every week, I'm getting my book in front of 10 to 20,000 people. So it's finding your audience is really hard and it does take a really long time actually, but
Hmm.
going through Story Origin, doing ads through like eReader News or Book Doggy are all really good because then you're putting it in front of an audience that's outside of your social media, because your social
Hmm.
media fans can only take so much, right? Because they're
Right.
bombarded with everything from all these other authors, and so you really want to get your book in front
Oh,
of
yeah.
new people all the time.
Hmm. I think you make a really, really good point with that. Honestly, and I'm curious to know your opinion on this too. Social media sales, in my mind, do not equate to book sales, not
No.
at all. And it's funny because it's, before I released my book, I did a little bit of homework and stuff, and just thinking what platform I wanted to use. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna try TikTok, and oof, that it's none of my sales were from TikTok, none of them.
Yeah.
So,
It's really hard. Like if I mean, I have kids that are in their 20s and they love using TikTok to market themselves. Like I have a kid that was in beauty school and he's using TikTok and Instagram to market themselves as a as a cosmologist.
sure.
So I think you have to have the right personality, and this kid is a former theater kid, so like already has those skills of being in front of the camera. So I think it just depends on like your personality. Like I'm much more comfortable on Facebook than I am on anything else, but Twitter also was blowing up before it became X. Now it's kind of died down. Now we
Hmm.
have Blue Sky, and I think a social media presence is really important to be on two or three really actively, but
Hmm.
you're not going to get sales from social media. What you're going to get sales from is newsletter swaps and ads.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Social media, I think I've maybe sold 30, 40 copies on social media. The rest have been through, my website, through just ads that I've ran on Amazon, and through, friends, family, word of mouth, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So, and I also think too, I mean, they always, and I'm sure you can agree with it, marketing is probably my least favorite part of the entire writing process. Do you agree?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
loathe sending out newsletters. I send out three newsletters every other week. And
Okay.
I it's such a tedious process for me, but I have seen such a huge uptick in sales doing newsletter swaps and doing
Sure.
book bundle swaps and stuff like that. But honestly, one of the best ways to market yourself is actually live podcasts, going Facebook Live, doing live
Hmm.
feeds on X. Like authors love it when they get to see that author face to face, even if it's something mundane as
Right.
playing with a cat, playing with a dog, like just your everyday life. People love the live interactions.
Hmm.
And so I think and book signings in your local area, if you can do that, is really good too. I live in a really big city, so it's very hard to get book signings.
Oh, I
But
bet.
I do have a huge event coming up here in Colorado in April that usually has about 2,000 attendees. So I'm really excited for that opportunity.
Well, then, that's super
Yeah.
exciting. So I got to ask you a question then. So you're doing all this extra marketing, and you're a full-time professor?
I'm just part time,
Part-time.
but
Okay.
in the world of college teaching, part-time doesn't really mean anything. It means you could teach
Sure.
1 or 8 classes depending on what the college needs. So I'm kind of one of those oddball professors that's in where I teach a lot of classes. And so, but it does give me the ability to teach like remotely or online or from home. And so I can do that as well as write and publish.
That's awesome. So how do you manage burnout though? That's my big thing for you because, for
It
me,
is,
right? Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was going to say, let me think about that for a second.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I mean, for me, I'm a, full-time employee as well through environmental consulting firm. I work 80% remote and I'm also watching my son and I'm, writing every single day trying to, generate content. So I was going to ask you being, much more experienced than myself, how do you manage burnout? Because it's a thing, right?
One of the things that I've actually backed off from doing is giving myself really strict deadlines. I used to
Mm,
put a book up for pre-order, and then when I was like halfway through with it, and then be like, yeah, I can get this done in no time. And then I got burned out and couldn't finish the book. And then, as we
mm,
all know, if you don't release that pre-order, Amazon bans you from pre-orders for a year.
uh-huh.
So I don't do strict deadlines. I wait till I finish a book, and then I'm like, okay, now it's time to do the pre-order and do the marketing and stuff. So I've learned to think more strategically ahead to like, here's a 6 month goal, a 1 year goal, a 2 year goal, a 3 year goal, so
Hmm.
that I'm not like, oh my gosh, all this stuff has to be done right now. Because our publishing company also does editing. So we have a few editors too that do editing for
Mm,
self published authors. So I have to manage a team of marketing specialists, of editors, of authors, and so it's really important to stay organized and know what's coming on like down the road so that you don't
hmm.
freak out about it at the last minute or that you feel really stressed with that deadline looming over you. So usually what one of the ways to manage burnout is just making sure that you're really organized. And I mean, I have a calendar that is color coded with class times, writing times,
Hmm.
commute times, like every
Everything.
detail. Yeah, every detail of every hour is kind of planned out. So I know what I should be doing next. And
Hmm.
also scheduling in blank times. So this is the time for the gym. This is the time I'm going to go use the hot tub at my apartment complex. This is the time I'm going to
Okay.
spend with my kids,
Mhm.
making sure to schedule those things out so I don't forget about those other things that are important. So having a schedule and then not having those unrealistic deadlines is really important to managing burnout.
Yeah, and you know what? To your point, first off, I think your process is extremely thorough. I was actually getting goosebumps because I'm so the opposite. I'm like, oh, you know what? I have an hour window here, and I'm glad I'm talking to you because I think I can, pull something from you. But more to the point, managing deadlines, you know, and you were talking about, the Amazon pre-order thing, and you can get banned if you don't meet that deadline. I got really nervous because, with self-publishing and without having a, publishing house, you have to make your own cover, format your book. And in case anybody doesn't know, that is not something that just takes like an hour or two. That takes an entire day. And so I remember sitting there literally the day before I had announced, like, hey, it's going to come out. Like, let's go. I could not format it correctly. And I had to stay up to like, I think it was like 4 or 5 in the morning. It's brutal. So I
I will
definitely hear
tell
you on
you,
that.
there's two hacks that I use, and one is I use GIMP, which is a free Photoshop program to create
Hmm.
covers. I do a lot of research with like 100 covers in my genre to make sure that my cover I'm creating or that my graphics design team is creating is on point. If we recently had to actually outsource cover design to an independent cover designer because we started the new publishing house for fantasy and science fiction. I'm not a fantasy and science fiction writer. I'm romance. So
Right.
we had to buy covers from a professional. But GIMP is an amazing free program that works like Photoshop so that you don't have the overhead costs of Photoshop. And
Mm,
then I use Draft Digital to format everything. So if you just upload a Word document to Draft Digital, it does all the formatting for you. It puts in page numbers, it puts in your name, and the service is completely free.
that's
So
awesome.
Draft to Digital is a lifesaver for formatting. So after 10 years, I would say it takes me probably about 3 to 4 hours to do a cover and formatting. So
Wow.
I've been able to shorten it down to that. But when I first started, I would spend 3 or 4 days per book. Um, and it was very, very time consuming. So I've kind of shortened it down to like, here's this cover, let's run it through our, beta testers at our publishing company. And then here's the formatted novel, let's run it through get it up for beta right now. And so I found ways to kind of work around that really lengthy process because it can be very daunting for authors, especially
Hmm.
if you're not a grad. And if you know, like I know I could never design a sci-fi or fantasy cover. It takes expertise that is outside of my, my boundaries there. I'm going to shop for a cover artist that's within my budget that has good reviews that I've heard, via word of mouth or that I've seen post things on Instagram or Facebook or X. And so it honestly, there's been a couple of times I found a cover and written a book to match the cover because the cover inspired me to write a book. So I always
Hmm.
tell like new authors, join cover groups on Facebook, look at cover designers because you never know when you're going to need one or when they're going to post something like a pre-made cover that might inspire you to write a book. So that's one way you can save yourself a little bit of heartache.
Yeah, certainly. Have you ever gone to well, maybe just so what I did is I'll back up for a second. I went to an artist to design my cover who actually painted on a canvas, and I have it in my basement. Have you ever taken that route, or do you prefer more of
I
like
have
the digital side of things?
I prefer the digital stuff because in the world of romance, it's all about like the attractive figures on the cover.
Hmm.
I recently have started doing like romantic suspense, which is more abstract, like scenery type covers and like a thriller mystery type genre. And so that requires a little bit more of like a landscaping scene. I have gone through artists on Fiverr before and done character art so that I could get somebody to draw my time travel series. I had somebody draw out the characters, and then we were able to turn that into a cover eventually. So I think that's really important to find somebody that can help you visualize what your characters look like, because that's a really good way to draw on the audience as well.
Mm, that's a good point. Speaking of romance novels and series, you just hope I'm correct, but you have a few part series that I noticed on Amazon, Dive More Dangerous, and it looks like your publication of that was July of 2024. Awesome. So you
So
released.
that's actually book
Oh,
4 of my romantic suspense series, The Defense Cumberland Intelligence Agency. So
mm,
it's a whole family legacy series of like, it starts with the grandparents and then their kids and then their kids, and they each go through a different thing where they're infiltrating the government from and saving the world from different espionage issues. So yes, A Drive More Dangerous is my newest book that came out in July of last year or July of this year.
awesome, awesome. And what is it about, you know, romance and, like a spy thriller? That's a really interesting concept to me. So was there like a what inspired you to write that?
I watch a lot of like spy movies where there's like the
Okay.
guy and the girl that fall in love with each other. And so Tom Cruise has a movie called Night and Day, which is one of my favorites with oh now that but it's he's a spy and then he has to save this girl and she becomes a spy with him. And so I actually love those type of movies where there's a lot of like romantic tension, but they're also like involved in a gang war or there's a shootout or there's something that's chasing them down. May have heard of The Spy Who Dumped Me, which is a recent movie come out in the last couple of years. It's a romantic comedy spy thriller, and so I've infused a lot of comedy into my books to come to kind of come up with that rom-com feel to a lot of the romantic suspense that I write. So I would say a lot of my genres are overarching like rom-com, but then they have that either contemporary romance or suspense or thriller or something like that to it.
Yeah, that's
So the
awesome.
first the first book in the Cumberland Intelligence Agency series is actually about a estranged wife who is running away from her husband, who's an alcoholic, and she runs into this whole world of aspiring that she gets embroiled in. And then she actually, meets the love of her life, has a daughter, and then her daughter grows up and discovers the secret family business that is the
Okay.
aspiring. And then she discovers and then her daughter discovers her grandfather who has set up this business. So I love dealing with family legacy type stories just to show like how messed up families can be, but how great they
Oh,
can be when
absolutely.
they learn to work together and learn to reunite too.
And they're literally saving probably the world, right? So that's so
Yeah,
cool.
the my second book in the series was actually when I met my husband, and he's a professor in cybersecurity. And so when we first started talking on Facebook, I picked his brain on all sorts of things, espionage and cybersecurity, and how to hack it, like unhackable materials. And there's a whole chapter in it's called the bridge less crossed is book two, and there's a whole chapter where they go into a bank vault and they find this hard drive that's completely disconnected to any kind of internet, and it has top secret spy codes on it, and they have to figure out how to plug this hard drive into a computer that isn't connected to the internet to get that information off from it. And so it was really awesome to get my husband's expertise on that because he's worked in the IT field for almost 20 years.
So you got some actually real content in there too. Like
Yes.
real. That's awesome. I love that. And I think, you know, talking from a reader's perspective, when an author takes the time to actually research their genre and actually have it accurate, makes a world of difference. You know, a world of, at least for me, right? It makes a world of difference knowing that this author is also an expert in their genre.
And when I started writing this, I was going through Frida McFadden and Colin Hoover books and reading all kinds of romantic suspense that I could get my hands on, even little dime store Harlequin novels labeled romantic suspense. I was reading and checking off the boxes of what I liked and what I disliked about the book. So, reading in your genre, researching your genre is just so, so important because I think readers can kind of tell when you haven't read a book
Absolutely.
in that genre because you're not following kind of some of those expectations. My husband's an author of urban fantasy and reads urban fantasy like no other. And so he's always looking at like tropes and how to avoid tropes and how to, creatively write in that same style, but also, come up with something that's new and original.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right on that too. I remember I was reading I forget the name of the book. It was a couple of years ago, and they had the currency was just called like money. And I mean, being a fantasy reader, that was very boring, you know, and why not make the currency like a golden coin called the Cenari or something like that, just something more
Right.
specific, rather than just it being called, you know, money or currency, right?
Look at like Star Trek does that. There's currency in every different world,
Oh
and
yeah,
it makes it like unique, and you're immersed in that culture. So that's definitely a good point. Like coming up with so many creative things like that is what really draws the reader in. Like when I wrote my steampunk novel when I was in graduate school, I actually loved the concept of having my kids were really big into Harry Potter, and I had a character that was inspired by Dobby, and his name is Dinga, and he's a little demon that actually saves the main character's life, and in turn she saves his life, so he owes her a life debt. So he follows her around throughout the book, and the readers just loved having that little character of a species that nobody had ever, really, because he's
right.
blue and he eats bugs and he's like very naive and doesn't know anything about humans because he has never left his little tribe before. And it got to the point where I actually had to introduce more of his species because when I
The
was
people
going
liked
through the
it.
beta, yeah, when I was going through the beta reader stage, people were just like, I don't care about any other characters, but if you kill him off, I will be very angry with you.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's such a good point, But we're looking like we're on the last couple of minutes, so I wanted to ask you a few questions. We were talking about, or a few more questions, I should say. I'm getting all sorts of mixed up. You were talking about deadlines, and I know you're, how do I word it? Well, I'll just say it. Do you have any future work that's coming out that you would like to tease, or you
Yes,
want
I
to?
do.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
actually putting up a book for pre-order probably this week. It's called A Cut Above, and it is a um cooking romantic suspense novel. So it is about a competitive cook who's on a Food Network type show. And then she ends up being sent home. And then other members of the team that were on this competition cooking show start to die. And she was the last one to talk to them in every circumstance. So
Okay.
she teams up with a police officer who has also been investigating the case, and they have to determine who is killing off all these competitive cooks.
Hmm.
And it's a very unique romantic suspense novel because the main character has a lot of secrets that kind of unravel throughout the book, and so
Mm.
does the police officer that she falls in love with. He is definitely not a good guy. So I'm playing a lot with morality in this book and looking at, can we really trust people, and can we really trust what they say is true? And then, is there motives that people can hide very easily? So
Mm.
it's kind of a serial killer who done it mystery novel, but
Sure.
I'm looking at a release probably at the end of March.
Wow, that's only in a couple months.
Yeah.
That's
The
super,
book is
super
like
exciting.
75% done. I just went on break from this crazy term, this crazy semester I've had.
Oh, I bet.
So usually between semesters, I can usually write anywhere between 20 and 40,000 words in a couple of weeks. So that's my goal, is to finish the book in a couple of weeks and put up that pre-order. And so I'm really looking forward to releasing that. The cover is just stunning. It's I actually found it as a pre-made cover from a fantasy author, and it just worked so well for this book. So
Awesome. Well, seriously, good luck on that, and I will definitely want to hear more from you in the coming months. So I'd love to have you back on. But the last question I want to ask you, for anybody else out there who isn't a published author, has this funny idea in their head, like, hey, I'm gonna go for it, right? What would you tell somebody who's never picked up, you know, a pencil or a book or typed on a keyboard, that's like, hey, I want to be an author. It sounds awesome. This is my dream. What would you tell them to help them out?
get get writing. Sit down and follow the Stephen King rule. Write $2,000 words a day. Do not do anything else until you have 2,000 words on the page, and do that every day. And even if it's just Monday through Friday, you'll have 10,000 words by the end of that first week. And that is a good solid 5 or 6 chapters to know where that story is going. I also recommend the program Scrivener, which helps you lay out a plot, lay out characters, lay out scenery. It helps you organize your thoughts. If you're brand new to writing, Scrivener is an awesome program to use. Also, if you're a visual person like I am, go through stock photos and look for pictures of your characters, or commission some art to be drawn, because having that visual inspiration that you can tack up on your wall somewhere is going to really help you sit down and get those 2,000 words on paper. I just had a student who submitted a great creative writing final to my class, and my advice to him was, add some more words to this and let's get you published, because he's already got like 10,000 words. And so if he can get that done and finished, let's get it out there. So do not ever give into imposter syndrome, because a lot of people think, well, I'm not really good at writing. I can't really write a novel, but I have this really good idea and I want to put it down on paper. There are editors and there are beta readers and there are ARC readers that will make that book shine. Just get those words onto a page, because we can't do anything without those words, right? So I tell people, even if you think that you're not good enough or that you're not ready to be an author, get it done, get it off to an editor, get it sent to a publishing company or agent, however you want to do it, but definitely get those words written, and then the rest will work itself out. Because if you have a really good idea and you can get that down on paper, a good editor is going to make that book awesome. So just get those words down on the page.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That's couldn't have said it better myself. Just practice, 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 get it down. Absolutely.
Even if you publish a short story that's 5,000 words, do it. I wrote a book that was 5,000 words and it ended up being 85,000 words after I published 4 or 5 more sections of it. And Stephen
There you
King
go.
used to do the same thing. He wrote short stories under
Oh yeah.
Richard Bachman for 20 years. I think he's still writing under that pen name. So even if you write a short story and you're like, man, it's not that much, but publish it, get it out there, get it shared, even if it's not that much. You don't have to write a huge fantasy novel your first time around. Work up to it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I agree with you. Great advice. Well, Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on to my podcast, and I definitely want to hear more from you in the future.
And definitely check out Thorn Heart Press and Thorn Dagger Press. Our newest release, Dauntless by Tom Atwood, is coming out on December 25th. And it is an urban fantasy Dresden Files meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer story. So we are excited to share that with the world.
Awesome. You guys heard it. Check it out. Get it now.
I'd like to thank you for tuning into today's episode. I'm Jake Strawn, your host. And if you're interested in supporting not only my guest, but myself, you can find my book on Amazon, Solent Chronicles, The Shattered Land, today. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.